Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Andrew, and I'm back again to do my episode breakdown for My Hero Academia Season 6. And let's just say that there's a fair amount that we can break down in this episode, and pretty much is telling on how this season's pacing will be going from this episode onward. So, let's dive right into the breakdown and see what we can find in this episode of My Hero Academia. So for starters, this chapter only adapts 2 chapters of the manga, from chapters 262 to chapters 263. So, future Andrew here, I actually want to make a correction on this. This episode actually covers 3 chapters, chapter 261, 262, and 263. So yeah, I was a little bit off about that, but yeah, I just wanted to correct it. Alright, back to the video. And this is very important to notice because this episode adapts a lot of what we get in the manga, but also adds a whole bunch of new scenes as well as expanding on already existing scenes in the manga. And as the title of this episode entails, this episode focuses mostly on chapter 262, where we see that MIRKO goes out and fights against these new types of NOMU. So, we get a recap of what happened last episode at the beginning of this episode before we dive more into new content for this episode, where it is followed with an expanded scene of the heroes fighting against the NOMU that broke through the wall. And there's some interesting stuff that I want to break down, and the fact of the matter is that this scene has actually been changed from the manga, where Endeavor in the anime actually completely incinerates this whale-like NOMU. In the manga, he just severely burns it, which just shows how much more powerful Endeavor is in the anime in comparison to the manga. As well as we got a few more scenes that expands on the heroes that are evacuating the hospital, with a slighter and larger focus on the Wild Wild Pussycats helping to evacuate the hospital. And probably what I found the most interesting of the expanded scenes in this episode is the scene between Endeavor as well as Aizawa, where we get expanded upon how Crust was able to enter the basement area with the help of Rocklock, but also how we get to see some cool and interesting banter between Endeavor and Aizawa that isn't in the manga. And Endeavor more or less asks Aizawa to be his sidekick and implies that he did not know what Aizawa's quirk was when it comes to the quirk of erasure. So this is very interesting, and it just shows a cool dynamic between Endeavor and Aizawa, and really just shows how much Endeavor has changed as a character with the fact that he's able to banter with a smile on his face, no less. From here, we also even get more expanded or just straight up new scenes of the students helping with the evacuation of civilians in the city itself. This is something that we really didn't get any of in this chapter or even within many of the following chapters until a very singular point. So it's cool that we get to see these students actively being heroes and doing what they were supposed to do, which is evacuate the civilians from the city. And from here, we're starting to get a little bit more back into the fight between MIRKO and the NOMUs, where we get the first proper introduction of Crust and what his ability or his quirk is, which is just shield, which allows him to create shields from any part of his body, which we see that he's able to do in this episode. But then we get to see MIRKO fighting against the doctor, trying to attack him, but we get this moment of Mocha coming in to save him, which is revealed that Mocha is actually a NOMU with double as his quirk. And we also, once again, get another expanded scene that we saw in the manga of Crust fighting against one of these, as the episode deems, high-end NOMUs. And as there is more explanation for how these high-end NOMUs are created with the help of All For One, and how long it takes for them to actually get one singular quirk inside of them. And something else that was expanded on in the anime that we really didn't see in the manga is after the fight or the attack from these high-end NOMU attacking MIRKO, we actually get to see her cancel out the attack in this episode, which isn't seen in the manga. As well as this is the moment where we get the proper explanation of MIRKO's quirk, which is just rabbit, which allows her to pretty much do everything a rabbit can do, but better. And from here, we actually get the first major censorship of this season, and it involves Mirko's arm. Because we see that Mirko is able to attack these Nomu, which we do get expanded upon in the anime of Mirko fighting off multiple of these Nomus in this episode, when in reality she was only fighting 2 or 3 at a time at the beginning of this hallway or building area. But the first scene of censorship actually happens when in the anime we see Mirko's arm gets crushed and twisted and parts of it gets broken off, but it's still pretty much there, with a heavy amount of bruising, as we've seen with characters like Deku with his arm. However, in the manga, that is not the case, because in the manga, she just completely rips her arm off completely with nothing left past the elbow or the part of the upper shoulder. So it shows that yes, there's still going to be censorship in this season of My Hero Academia, but it's not going to be as egregious as we saw in season 5 with Shigaraki's fingers. Also, I like to bring this up, Mirko dodges laser fire. And once again, in this episode, we get an added scene where we focus on the police department in their office actually communicating and coordinating this assault on the villains. And once again, I just find this extremely fascinating that we get to see this in the anime, which wasn't in the manga, and it pretty much shows that this is a truly organized force where it's not just the heroes, but pretty much every aspect of society helping in to try and stop the villains in this moment. And this is the moment where we actually cut over to the Gunga Mountain Villa team led by Edshot, as we get an expanded scene of Midnight talking with Kaminari and trying to comfort him and explain to him why he's needed in this battle. And as the heroes in this episode are progressing towards the mansion, we once again get an expanded scene as well as new scenes involving Skeptic, where he is shown to be observing the conversation that we saw last chapter of Hawks as well as Bubagawara talking about and revealing the information about Shigaraki, which was what led the heroes to potentially invading this villa at this moment. And Skeptic comes to this realization where we get more scenes of just Skeptic trying to observe and monitor Hawks, but yet Hawks was still able to avoid his purview. And that's going to be very important later on in this season, about how even though Skeptic has Hawk's bugs, Hawks was still able to avoid being captured and being seen by Skeptic, even through all of the security cameras that Skeptic has, including potentially the ones that he has on Hawks himself. Also, I just find it cool that they're able to reuse animation in this very unique and interesting way. And while this is all happening with all of the villains trying to understand the situation that is going on, we just get the small scene of Dabi just ignoring everything and walking away. Yeah, I really doubt that he's going to be playing any important role in this season when it comes to Dabi and his involvement with the story. It's not going to happen, I promise you, trust me. And then we get towards the end of the episode where we get a big moment with Kaminari going up against an individual with electric powers and is also one of the lieutenants of the regiment of the Paranormal Liberation Front, and how we get to see that he's able to use his big bombastic lightning move, but Kaminari is able to absorb it, and that is the reasoning why he is here on the battlefield. And what is great about this scene is that this was actually predicted, or should I say foreshadowed, in the second movie of My Hero Academia, where Kaminari pulls off this exact same move against the villain 9 in that movie. And what is interesting about that is that that movie came out before this scene came out in the manga. So it just shows how connected the movies, the anime, and manga is when it comes to the canon of this series of My Hero Academia. But yeah, we do end this episode with a huge moment of Kaminari and a huge moment of character development for his character. But something I would like to add is that there is actually a cut scene or a cut panel in the manga that does not appear in this episode of the anime, but will most likely appear in next week's episode as seen by the previews. So yeah, this is pretty much the end of the breakdown. Was there anything that I missed that you saw that I didn't? Leave your comments down below and maybe I'll address them in the next episode of this breakdown. So yeah, like, comment, subscribe, do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!